Hello. Um, I've been doing multiple streams, and then I stopped doing them, but I didn't stop learning it. I completed the JS course, and already watching that React course in Coding Addict channel. So I don't wanna start everything from scratch. So yeah.
Once we're done with conditional rendering. If you're wondering why are we hopping like that, simply because use of a cleanup function is somewhat tricky topic. So in this course iteration, I decided to use different example in the hopes that it will help students to understand the main concepts better. And since in the example, we're going to toggle component, we first need to cover conditional rendering. Yes, I also prefer conditions. So let me start with the first one, and I'll say falsy, and this is going to be or example. Let me set up a colon, then I'm going to go with the curlies, and I'm looking for a text, so that's my falsy value, and I'm going to use my or operator. So now you have to guess, which one is going to be displayed? Is it going to be the text one, basically empty string, or is it going to be a hello world? And once I say I have hello world, why? Well, because with or operator, if this is going to be falsy, then it's going to display the second value. So now let me copy and paste, and like I said, I want to set up 4 of them. So this is going to be and then this will be truthy. So now let me select both of them, and I'll say truthy, and this one will be and. And here, effectively, I just want to change the operator, and once I save, notice, now I have empty string. So this is how it's going to work in React. Again, it's the same as in JavaScript. If we have falsy and we have and, then effectively we display the first one. So now let's just change this around where it's not going to be text. Essentially, I want to go with name. And you'll see that we have opposite behavior, where if this is or, then we'll display the first one. However, if we have the and one, then of course we'll display the second one. So if this is truthy, then we right away display the second value. And lastly, I just want to mention that, of course, we're not limited to just set up this functionality in the JSX directly. I can also do something like this, where I'm going to go with const and then code example, and that one is equal to whichever value I want. So again, I'm going to use the same one, where I'm going to go with text and then hello world, and then we can render it right away in the JSX, just showing you multiple options that you have. Let me save that, and of course, since this is falsy again, we have or operator, so we display the second value. That should do it for general concept. Next, let's look at the most common examples. Okay, and once we're familiar with the general concept, now let's take a look at some examples. So in the app JSX, I want you to import 0.5 and then the examples. And as far as the component, notice over here, we have a few more values. And basically, we still have the empty string, still have some kind of text, also a user, and we also have a Boolean value. And effectively, when it comes to or, quite often it is used to display some kind of default value. So let's say if I navigate here and if I set up a div, and then inside of that div, I want to go with some kind of heading 2. Imagine this. I have some kind of value. In this case, I'm going to go text, and if that value doesn't exist, then I want to go with some kind of default one. Now, if you're wondering why value wouldn't exist, well, keep in mind that quite often we'll be getting stuff from the API, and it's not guaranteed that for all the items that property is actually going to be there. So this is very useful, where you can be like, okay, try to set this property. If not, then use the default value. And of course, let's go with name here, and you'll see that if the value is there, then of course we'll display the value. So that is a pretty common approach for or operator in React. Now, when it comes to and, it's a little bit different, where instead of text, you essentially control what elements are going to be displayed. Now, I'm going to show you both examples where we use the elements as well as the components. Just keep in mind that both of them effectively work exactly the same way. So if I go here, and right after text, I'm just going to go with the curlies, and I'll say if text evaluates to true, what do I want to do? Well, then I want to return a div with 2 heading 2s. So let's go over here, and let's say div, close the div here, and then inside of the div, we want to go with those 2 heading 2s. In one, I'm going to display the name. So I'm going to go over here, and I'll say heading 2, whatever, and return. And then right after that, we want to go with heading 2, and I'm going to access the name over here. And notice once I save, I don't see anything. Why? Well, because this is false, correct? So this one is an empty one. And as a result, we don't return anything. Basically, we'll have nothing in the browser. And that's something important to keep in mind where, in this case, there's always going to be that heading 2 tag. However, if we use AND operator, and basically we set up whatever we want to return, you'll actually notice that there is no div with those heading 2s. It just doesn't exist. So we only have this heading 2 with default value. We don't have that second div. Now, of course, if this is going to be truthy, if we'll add just, let's say, even one character.
So let's check that out by myself. Well, I downloaded this Vivaldi browser because it's way more comfortable to work, because we can like split 2 tabs and watch those simultaneously. So
You'll right away notice that, first of all, since we have the OR operator here, it's going to display this one. And when it comes to text, well, now, since this evaluates the true, now we actually render div with those 2 heading 2s. And of course, we access the name here as well. So those are pretty common approaches where, again, we use OR inside of the element if we want to display some kind of default one, and we use AND to control effectively what we return. Now, of course, this is going to be dynamic. At the moment, we're just hard coding, but normally this is going to be dynamic. So let me set it back here to an empty string. And again, notice how we're not returning anything. And before I show you the component example, let's also cover that we can use the not operator. So at the moment, this is falsy, right? That's why we don't display anything. However, if I stick a not operator in front of it, you'll see that actually everything is displayed. Now, if you're not familiar with not operator, in the README, essentially you'll find code examples for vanilla.js. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on that because I want to move on with React topics. But again, if you need to jog your memory on the not operator, please utilize the README where you'll find the vanilla.js examples. And of course, it's going to be easier to understand. So essentially, if I just stick here the exclamation point in front of it, I'm good to go. I'm actually displaying this. Why? Well, because by default, essentially, this is falsy. However, with not operator, I'm looking for the opposite value. So now this is truthy, and I display it over here. Again, something important to keep in mind. So I'll copy and paste. I'll remove this one, and I'll just comment this one out over here, just so we don't have too many. And as always, you can reference the README as well. And now, since we're familiar how we can use the AND operator to return some elements, why don't we also take a look how we can do the same thing with components. So below my first component, I want to go with the second one. I'm going to go with const, and then I'll just say some component. Now, I know that I'll pass the prop, so I'll right away destructure it. And essentially, I'm going to be looking for the name prop. So let's go over here. And then as far as the return, we'll do the same thing. It's just now we'll return from the component. So if I go with return, then space, and I'll cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to copy and paste. So that's going to be my component. Let me scroll up over here, and I guess I'll do after not. So I'll set up over here a logic where Essentially, if the value is true, then I want to return that component. And in this case, I'm going to be looking for the user, just to use a more complex example. So notice user, set user, use state, and this is an object. And of course, this will evaluate to true. So now let's scroll down, and let's say over here that if the user exists, only then I want to display the component. So I'll say over here some component, and then I want to pass in that name prop. Now, what is it going to be equal to? Well, I'm going to go with name equals to user.name, and then I want to close over here the component. And as you can see now in the browser, we have John, because that's the value over here. Again, both of them do exactly the same thing. So either you can return a bunch of elements, or you can set it up here in the component. And also, please keep in mind that, like I keep saying, this is going to be dynamic. So essentially, you'll try to fetch the user from the database. If the user exists, then I want to display some kind of component with the values that represent that user. And if it doesn't exist, let's say if the API or database returns that this is null, what do you know? We're not displaying that component altogether. Hopefully that is clear. And up next, I also want to show you how we can use ternary operator in JSX. Okay, and while we're still on the topic of conditional rendering examples, why don't we also quickly cover ternary operator? Because this is also something that you'll see quite often in JSX. And just to jog your memory, effectively in JavaScript, we have this option to check for condition. And if it's true, then we return the first expression. If not, then we return the second one. And the way it's going to work in JSX, first I want to navigate back to the same file. So again, we're not changing the files in here. We'll work in the same one. First, I'll start with some kind of divider, and I'm going to go with heading 2, and I'll just say ternary operator. And then in here, why don't we add a little bit of CSS? And I'm just going to add some margin top bottom, and left and right, I'll keep it 0. So 1 REMs and then a 0. And after that, I want to render the button. So let's go with button. Let's add a little bit of styles here. So I'll say here class name, and then that one is equal to btn. And then inside of the button, I'm going to check for is editing. And if is editing is true, then as far as the content, it's going to be edit. And if not, it's going to be add. So let's go over here, and let's say is editing. And then we want to set up the question mark here. And then the first value is going to be if it's true. So if is editing is true, then we'll display edit. If not, then we'll go with add. Save that. And now, of course, since this is false, that's why we go with add. Now, if we'll change this to true, you'll see right away that the text actually is edit. And not to sound like a broken record, but of course, normally this is going to be dynamic. So if I go back over here to false, then I'll have add. And I also want to showcase how we can use the ternary operator to return elements, just like we covered with AND operator. So this is one option where we just check if the value is true, and then we return the component. But we can also use ternary operator. And essentially, if it's true, then we return one set of elements or the components. And if it's false, then of course we return other set of elements. And in here again, I'm going to check for user. So I set up the curlies. I'll go here with my ternary operator. And let's start with a div. And again, just to speed this up, I'm going to grab this value over here. So let me go here. We want to copy and paste. Yep, this is what we want to do. Now, I'm not going to probably return 2 of them. You know what? I'm just going to go here with heading 4. And then inside of it, I'll say hello there and user. So what am I doing over here? Well, since I have a user object, if it's true, if it's not null, then of course I'll display div with the username. Now, if it is false, then I'm going to go with colon over here. And basically, I'll just say, hey, you need to log in. So there is no user. So in order to do that, I'm just going to change here heading 2. I'm not going to be looking for user because now I know that this is false, of course. And then I'll just say, please log in. And you'll notice that right away we have hello there, user John. And if we change this to null again, then of course I'll have please log in. So let me go back to John. And we successfully covered the most common examples. I know that last few videos were probably a little bit tedious because we were just flipping the values from true to false. And that's why up next, I want to work on 2 challenges where you'll be able to utilize this knowledge. All right, and first I want to work on the toggle challenge. So in the app JSX, import this file, 06 toggle challenge. This is what you'll see on the screen. And as far as the challenge, I want you to create a state value. And in this case, I'm going to go with Boolean. Please keep in mind that, of course, you can set up a different value. Again, we're talking about truthy and falsy. Just to make it easier, I'm going to go with Boolean. Then in the JSX, we want to return a button and a component or element. So for sure, return a button. And then after the button, set up some kind of element or a component. That's really up to you. In my example, I'm going to use the component, but of course you can use the element as well. And then when the user clicks the button, toggle the state value, this sucker over here. And then based on that value, conditionally render component element. And I want to right away tell you that there's multiple ways how we can set this up. So again, and if your logic works, do whatever makes the most sense to you. Now, as far as my setup, first of all, I want to navigate to the file. So I'm going to go to toggle challenge. We want to grab the use state. Again, I'm going to go with auto import. So I'm going to go with use state. Let's grab that one, and it's going to be false by default. Now, as far as the name, I'm going to go with show alert, and then comma, and then set show alert. Now, that is equal to, of course, my value. Okay, good. Let's save that. And like I said, now we want to set up that button. So in here, I'm going to go with div. And first is going to be my button. So btn, blah, 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 class name, btn, and then on click. For now, let's not worry about it. I just want to showcase how it's going to look like. So I have my toggle button. And like I said, after that, if you want to set up elements or element, you can definitely do so. In my case, I'm going to set up the alert just so I can showcase some classes that we have in CSS. So in here, if I go with alert component, and then as far as the return, if I go with, let's say div, return, and then div, let's add class names. So we have two of them, alert, which basically adds the general styles. And then I also have alert danger, which essentially just adds some colors and all that kind of stuff. So let me close it here and let me say hello world. Let me save this. And now I want to go up where I have the toggle challenge and I want to just display the alert for now. And this is what we're going to see on the screen. Now, awesome. Up next, I want to actually toggle this value. So first of all, let's come up with the function. And in my case, that's going to be toggle alert. So I'm going to call this toggle alert. That's my function. And then before I set up the functionality, I want to actually invoke it every time I click. So remember it was on click. And then we want to go with toggle and alert. And as far as the functionality, well, we want to toggle the state value, right? And like I said, there's multiple ways how we can set this up. At the end of the video, I'll show you a shortcut. But for now, we can simply do it this way, where I'm going to check what is the value of show alert. Basically, if this is true, then I want to go with set show alert and I'll set it equal to false. And very important, we want to go here with return. Why? Well, because I'm going to be setting up logic after my condition. And if I don't add the return, then basically it's going to hit this functionality as well, because that's how JavaScript is reading the code. So let me go here with true and notice. So if this is true, I want to set it equal to false. If not, then basically we'll just skip this condition and we'll set it equal to true. So this is awesome. But of course, alert is always going to be displayed. We also need to implement right now our AND operator, correct? So I'm going to go with show alert. If this is true, then what do I want to do? Well, that's when I want to display that alert. So let me save it over here and notice once I click, this is of course now true and I display the alert. Once I click one more time, then of course it's false and I don't display the alert. And as far as the shortcut, let me keep scrolling and notice over here this not operator. So essentially we can just make it a one-liner where instead of setting up the entire function and all that, I can just pass here the arrow function and I can say set show alert and then not. So the opposite value of the current value of show alert. So if it's true, then set it equal to false. And if it's false, then set it equal to true. Hopefully that is clear. So I'm going to navigate back. Again, I'm going to comment this one out just so it stays for your reference. And now let's do that one-liner where basically we will go here with my arrow function and then we'll just say set show alert and set it to the opposite value. Let's say that and then notice our functionality still works. Everything is awesome. We still add that alert component if this is true. However, now we have less lines of code. All right, and up next, I want to work on the user challenge. So essentially in the app JSX, we want to import this one, the 07 user challenge. And as far as the challenge, we want to set up the state value. In my case, I'm going to go with user, and the default value is going to be null. Then I want you to create two functions, one login function that sets the user equal to a object with a name property. So you simply want to set it equal to object, the name property, and some kind of value. Again, that value is totally up to you. And then we also want to set up a logout button.
I guess it's enough for now. I have some stuff to do. And I'll be back like, I don't know, in how much. Well, I will do another streams.